Week 8 of the fantasy football season. His wide receiver sits and starts at every matchup. This week, the first game, Baltimore Ravens at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So right here, Rashad Bateman I have as a borderline option this week for this Raven team. He returned to Week 7, and he didn't have the greatest of games. But right here, I think being back and being healthy now for Bateman could go a long way for this Raven passing offense, because over the last few weeks here, Lamar Jackson, his numbers have dropped. Mark Andrews obviously not 100% and banged up, and maybe we'll see more out of Bateman in this one, but right now I have him as a borderline option. Devin Duvernay, we just haven't seen enough from him this season here to be a guy that I'm going to say go in there and start him each and every week. And versus a pretty good Bucs secondary, even though the last couple weeks here teams have scored on him, I would say sit Duvernay, because he's pretty much a deep all or nothing at this point. Now to the Tampa Bay Bucs side of things, Mike Evans is a start in this one. He's putting up good numbers this season, coming off a 9-catch, 96 yards in that ball game, and it obviously could have been more, but he dropped a 60-plus yard touchdown to start the game. Is Mike Evans, where the defender fell, he burned him, and he just couldn't hold on, and that probably changed the outlook of that game. But anyway, Mike Evans is a start, and Chris Godwin, he's starting to get healthy now for this Buck team, and we see him being a possession receiver, a lot of bubble screens, a lot of short routes, and this week here versus Baltimore, wouldn't surprise me to see Godwin have his best game of the season on Thursday Night Football. The next game, Denver Broncos versus the Jacksonville Jaguars in London. So Cortland Sutton, he's a start each and every week, no doubt about it. He's been playing good football. Looks like Russell Wilson, surprisingly, he's going to come back in this one, when I thought he would be out multiple weeks with the hamstring injury. But right here, they got confidence Russ can make the flight to London, and they got confidence that he'll be ready to go here. Well, in something where Russell Wilson has been solid this season, putting up wide receiver 2 numbers, and I got him to start this week. And now Jerry Jeudy with the news that Russell Wilson's coming back. Him and Wilson just haven't been on the same rapport, and I know he had a good game with Brett Rypien was Jerry Jeudy, but in this one with Russ, I'm going to have him as a borderline option this week. Obviously, in deeper leagues, you're probably going to start him, because this week only 2 teams on bye anyway, with the Los Angeles Chargers and the Kansas City Chiefs. So this week here, I got Jeudy as a borderline option, even though he came off a good game with Rypien. Like I said, now Jacksonville side of things, Christian Kirk, he's pretty much a start each and every week. I know the numbers have tailed off for him over the last month of the season. After the first 3 weeks of the year, he was putting up numbers, but Christian Kirk's a guy you pretty much start as a number 2 flex option receiver each and every week. And now Marvin Jones and Zay Jones, they're just too inconsistent. I know Zay Jones has been getting targets, but the fantasy numbers haven't been there for him over the last 3-4 weeks here. So he's a sit. And Marvin Jones, the same thing. There's some games he'll go off, and then some games he barely shows up in the box score, and he's a guy you can't trust, so he's a sit. Now to the Cardinals at the Minnesota Vikings. DeAndre Hopkins finally came back off suspension last week, and he looked good in that ball game, going over 100 yards, so he looks like he's in midseason form. Him and Kyler Murray had for the good rapport and good ESP, and he's a start this week. Now to Rondale Moore. He got off to a great start in that one with a 31-yard catch for Rondale Moore, but after that, he didn't do anything in that ball game. So right now, it's hard to trust him after coming off that game. And we saw DeAndre Hopkins and Benjamin were pretty much the whole offense over there in Arizona, getting a majority of the workload. So right here, he's a borderline option. And Robbie Anderson, I know down the line this season, he could be a guy that's a deep threat and a good player for this Cardinal team. But right now, he didn't see a lot of plays in that game. He's got to pick up the playbook, obviously. But even in this matchup, I can't go out there and trust Anderson. He has a bench stash and see what he could do for a couple weeks. But right here, to put him in your lineup or even a borderline option, I don't have it this week. Him as a sit. And now to the Vikings side of things, Justin Jefferson, we know top 3 receiver minimum this season. You're starting him every week. And Adam Thielen, he's carved out a decent wide receiver 2 flex option each and every week. But this week here in a good matchup versus Arizona, especially with the Vikings, they graded home over the last few seasons. I think Thielen once again has a good game, and he's a receiver I would start this week. Now Dolphins at the Detroit Lions. So right here, Tyreek Hill, you know what you're going to get from him. Top numbers pretty much each and every week. And Jalen Waddle, he looked good with his return as well. So right here, these guys are starts. And the Lions, one of the worst secondaries in all pro football. So these guys could put up top 5, top 10 performances this week. Now to the Lions side of things, Amon St. Brown, we saw him leave the ball game versus the Dallas Cowboys early, but it looks like he possibly might play in this one. So if he plays, he's an each and every week start. And now Josh Reynolds, he played in this game, but only one catch for 8 yards. And I don't think he's 100% either. And his snap count wasn't that high in that ball game for Josh Reynolds. So right now, after coming off of 4 games in a row with double-digit fantasy points in PPR leagues, I can't trust Reynolds this week. This Dolphin defense is pretty solid, I believe. Even with backup guys, they took care of business versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. So right here, I got Reynolds as a sit. And Khalif Raymond, he had a decent ball game versus the Dallas Cowboys, where he played almost every snap in that one and was operating pretty much as a number one option for Jared Goff versus the Cowboys. But he's still a guy you can't trust, especially if St. Brown's back. He's a sit as well in this one. Chicago Bears at the Dallas Cowboys. So Darnell Mooney, it's been an up and down season here for him. But this bad team, they're built on running the football and trying to win ball games on defense. And that's exactly what we saw from them in that Week 7 blowout of the New England Patriots. So Justin Fields, he's been running more the last couple weeks here, going over 70, 80 yards in the last 2 ball games. And Darnell Mooney only had 8.30 fantasy points in Week 7. So right now, versus tough Cowboys secondary, hard to trust Mooney as a guy to put in your lineup. So I got him as a sit. Now to CeeDee Lamb, he didn't have a great game with Dak Prescott back in the lineup, but CeeDee Lamb, we know he could break out at any time and put up top numbers. But right now, this week here versus a bad team, I think he'll have a good ball game in CeeDee Lamb. We saw Deontay Parker have a good ball game for the New England Patriots. We saw Myers find the end zone. So I think CeeDee Lamb in this one, he could find the end zone possibly. And he's a receiver each and every week. You're going to have as a low-end number 1 receiver in your lineup or number 2 guy. And then Michael Gallup, he's a sit this week. Only 2 targets in last week's ball game here for Michael Gallup. And to be honest, I think this Cowboy team might have rushed him back from the ACL injury. I know he was in there with Cooper Rush for a few weeks back. He didn't do anything except scored a touchdown in his first game, and it's been quiet since then. But even last week with Dak back and a beatable matchup, he wasn't on the field much. He didn't get targeted. And we saw a lot of Noah Brown. So right here, Gallup's a sit for me this week here in Week 8. Now to the old Vegas Raiders at the New Orleans Saints. So Devontae Adams, you drafted him as a top wide receiver. He's a start each and every week. Now to Matt Collins and Hunter Renfrow, they had okay ball games in Week 7. We saw Matt Collins find the end zone in that one versus the Texans, so that was a good thing to see. And Hunter Renfrow had one of his better games of the season, even though it's not saying much, with 3 catches for 55 yards in that one. So Renfro's a borderline option. In 3 receiver leagues, you're probably going to put him in there, is Renfrow, even though only 2 teams on bye this week. But right now, in a beatable matchup versus a weak Saints secondary, especially if Matt Lattimore is not going to be in this ball game, Renfro's possibly a start. Now to the Saints side of things, Chris Olave, he's a start each and every week as this rookie. He's turning into one of the best receivers in the league quickly right now, it looks like, for Olave. And obviously the number 1 guy over there in New Orleans, so you fire him up in the starting lineup. And Michael Thomas, if he plays, you're going to start him in a ball game with a potential shootout written all over it. But Michael Thomas, to be honest, I've been saying this for weeks now, and going back to last year, if you've been watching the channel that long, he's a guy that I think he don't care about football anymore. He made his money, and now with injuries to the Saints, he's banged up. I'm not going to say he's not hurt, but he's already dragging this toe injury out for 3-4 weeks. So if he comes back, you'll put him in the lineup. But he's a guy you can't count on this season. And a guy in the preseason I said avoid for these reasons here is Michael Thomas. Now Jarvis Landry, Traquan Smith, and Callaway are all sits for me. We've seen Smith and Callaway be the starters the last couple weeks here, with the injuries to Olave missing 1 game and Thomas and Landry being out for a few weeks. But they're not really generating anything. Jawan Johnson, the tight end, had bigger ball games, and a lot of Kamara out of the backfield and Taysom Hill getting some gadget plays. So right there, those wide receivers are sits for me this week. Carolina Panthers at the Atlanta Falcons. So DJ Moore, he had a resurgence with 69 yards and a touchdown in Week 7 versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So as a borderline option here, I'm not going to go all in and trust DJ Moore right away here for this Carolina Panther team. But if he has another good ball game, he'll be back on the starter radar. But right now, he's a borderline option. And to Drake London, the last 4 weeks here, he's had under 7 fantasy points. And coming off 1 catch, 9-yard performance is Drake London in a ball game where they had to throw a lot and were trailing by 2-3 touchdowns, most of it was this Falcon team. That's not a good thing. And right here, how could you trust London? I had big hopes for him coming into the year as one of the top rookie wide receivers. But right now, it's been a struggle for him over the last month. Teams adjusted after he got off to a great start this season here. Mariota, he just don't throw the football. So London is a sit this week. Yeah, he could turn things around, but how could you trust him? Now the Patriots at the New York Jets. Jacoby Myers, he's a start each and every week, pretty much, as a third receiver flex option. He's going to get double-digit fantasy points every week, is Meyer. He's been solid at getting that 10 to 12 points per week here for fantasy owners. And I know it's not a great matchup versus the Jet defense that's been playing lights out for the most part, but I still would start Myers. And now Devontae Parker and Tyquan Thornton are going to be sits in this one. Parker, I know, had a few nice catches in that Monday night game and has a decent track record in his career versus the Jets. But in this one, we don't know if it's going to be Zappe, who looked good coming in for Jones. And then in the second half, Zappe didn't do anything versus the Bears. So right here, Parker and Thornton, it's just too hard to trust them, in my opinion. It's not a consistent output of numbers for them. And Thornton, he only caught one ball in that ball game on Monday Night Football, even though there was a couple plays where they just missed on big plays to Thornton. So obviously the Patriots like him. They're running him out there as the third receiver. But this week here versus the Jets, I don't have him as a start. I have him as a sit into the Jet side of things. Garrett Wilson, Corey Davis, and Elijah Moore, they were all sits for me. These guys haven't done anything pretty much here with Zach Wilson at quarterback. The Jets, they've been winning these ball games with Wilson, with obviously great running the football, but now that could be gone with Breece Hall out and playing good defense. And these wide receivers haven't done anything. Garrett Wilson, in the last month, his best game is 6.40 fantasy points, and that's not getting the job done. And he's a wide receiver to sit this week. Now the Steelers at the Eagles. Right here, Deontay Johnson, good PPR possession receiver. He's a start for me in this one. It's a number 2-3 option at the flex here. Deontay Johnson's still a guy that's going to go out there, get you 10-12 fantasy points, and still the number 1 target over there in Pittsburgh. Chase Claypool, he had a good game in week 6, but in week 7 he didn't really do anything, and he's a sit here for me. And George Pickens, I'm on the fence about him. I know he's had 3 out of 4 good ball games with double-digit fantasy points, and coming off an acrobatic touchdown catch on Sunday Night Football versus the Dolphins in week 7. But right here in a tougher matchup versus Philadelphia, even though we could see Philly get up to a quick lead where they got to throw 40-50 times here as Pittsburgh, where Pickens will get volume in this one. But right here, I just got him as a borderline option. I think I got to see one more week out of Pickens to name him a full-time start each and every week. But if obviously Claypool gets traded, that'll be the thing here for Pickens. Now to the Eagles, A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. I know these guys don't have monster ball games week in and week out, but they got potential each and every week to put up 30, 35 fantasy points. And in a good matchup versus a pretty weak Steelers secondary here, I have them both as starts this week. Titans at the Houston Texans. So Robert Woods, we've seen nothing from him. He's a touchdown-dependent wide receiver, and there's just not much to say about him. So I got him as a sit. And now Brandon Cooks, I got him as a borderline option. Cooks, this season, it really hasn't been great with him. And he's another name on the trade block that we could see getting traded soon here is Brandon Cooks. But right now, I got him as a borderline option. Like I said, only 2 bye weeks this week here. So a lot of receivers going to be available for fantasy owners. And like I said, Cooks has been inconsistent and pretty much not the favorite target of Davis Mills. Now going to his favorite target is Nico Collins. And he's been pretty decent over the last few weeks, but he left the ball game with injury versus the Las Vegas Raiders in week 7. So right here, Nico Collins, he's a guy I can't trust him each and every week. And with the bye weeks only being 2 teams in the Los Angeles Chargers and the Chiefs here, I got Collins as a sit this week. Now to the Giants at the Seattle Seahawks. So Wan'Dale Robinson, I got him as a borderline option. He's looked decent so far in the first 2 ball games back from injury here, but he was banged up as well in the end of that game for the Giants versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. So he's questionable, it looks like, but I think he's going to play, but he's a borderline option. Right now is Wan'Dale Robinson. Now to Darius Slayton, he's coming off another good game and 2 out of 3 good ball games. It's been here for Slayton, but he's another guy. Could you really trust him with all the bye weeks? And this Giant passing game's a revolving door. Every week it seems like it's a different player right now. So right here, Darius Slayton, I got to see a little more out of him to have him a borderline guy or a start. So this week I'm going to have him as a sit. Yeah, he could have a good game versus this weak Seattle secondary, but right now I just can't count on it 100%. So I got him as a sit. Now to the Seahawks side of things, DK Metcalf, we saw him leave the ball game with an injury. And Pete Carroll's still holding out hope that he plays, but to be honest, I don't think Metcalf is going to play. But if he does play by some miraculous thing here, I would have him as a start. He's pretty much a receiver you put in the lineup each and every week. And same for his counterpart, Tyler Lockett, who's been pretty solid this season. After the last few seasons, a lot of inconsistent ball games for Lockett. He's been consistent this season. He's been making plays for the Seahawks team. And he's a guy that's a great deep threat for Geno Smith, who's not scared to go deep down the field. And now to Marquise Goodwin, we see him have a huge ball game with 5 catches, 67 yards, and 2 touchdowns versus the Chargers. So right here, if DK Metcalf's out, I still have Marquise Goodwin as a borderline guy. Throughout his career, he's not known to really put up great numbers as Goodwin, so it was a little bit fluky. Even though we know Geno and him have a good rapport as Marquise Goodwin, he's been serving as the number 3 wide receiver. But we haven't seen anything from Goodwin going back many seasons now to his San Francisco 49er days. He's bounced around the league with a few teams, Eagles included. And this week, I would have to see a little bit more before I put him in the starting lineups. If you pick him up off the waiver wire and stash him, it's a good move. But this week, I got him borderline. Now to the 49ers at the Los Angeles Rams. So Deebo Samuel I have as a start. I know he's banged up, and hopefully he could go in this ball game. And Deebo, he always comes through in these bigger ball games, especially versus division rival, the Los Angeles Rams. So he's the start. And Brandon Ayuk now, the last 2 weeks here, he's been putting up fantasy points with 15 or more fantasy points in that time. Him and Jimmy G are building back up that rapport that we saw in Ayuk's rookie season when he took the league by storm. And right now, he's a guy you got to start as your number 2 wide receiver or third guy here is Brandon Ayuk. The volume's been good. He's got the knack for the end zone. And Jimmy G's targeting him. And now to the Rams side of things, Cooper Kupp, you know he's the best receiver in the league. You start him each and every week. Allen Robinson, it was good to see him score a touchdown before the bye week, but I still can't trust them versus this tough 49er defense, even though they got shredded by Patrick Mahomes. And Von Jefferson coming off injured reserve, most likely going to play in this game. And finally, a guy that could stretch the field here for this Ram offense, going deep. I just can't trust him right away coming out of the gate. We don't know what kind of snap count he's going to be on, and we don't know what he could do. But right now, I got him as a sit this week. Now the Washington Commanders at the Indianapolis Colts. So Terry McLaurin, he looked good with Taylor Heineke and had the best game of the season here was McLaurin. So right here versus a mediocre Colt defense, I know this ball game's in Indianapolis and they play better at home here. I would have McLaurin as a start. And even Curtis Samuel, he had a solid ball game in Week 7 with, I believe, 11.9 fantasy points is Curtis Samuel. So he's a guy they use in many positions. And this Washington team, they want to have safe and quick throws here with Taylor Heineke at quarterback. And that's where Curtis Samuel fits in as an underneath guy, a guy to run some slants and even some end arounds and running work. So I got them both as low-end 2 receivers this week. And now Jahan Dotson, he should be back in this ball game. And he's a guy I'm not going to start. We got to see how he works with Taylor Heineke and his quarterback. Him and Carson Wentz had a good rapport before Wentz went down with injury. So Jahan Dotson should be back in this ball game. But I got him as a sit, but a guy to stash on your bench. And now to the Colts side of things, we're going to see Sam Engler as the starting quarterback. So they pulled the plug quickly on Matt Ryan after 7 weeks here as this Indianapolis Colts team. So Michael Pittman, he can't get any worse, to be honest. He's only had 1 monster ball game this whole season, and he was a guy a lot of people spent the second, third round pick on in fantasy drafts. Paris Campbell, I don't know what his role is really going to be, but he's a guy I got to roll out there in this one because he's had 23 targets in the last 2 games. Obviously, this Colts team, they're trying to fix that offense and quick throws, and that's why maybe Sam Ehlinger is coming in there. Maybe he's a little more mobile than Matt Ryan in his career, and maybe his release point is a little bit better than Matt Ryan because this offensive line cannot block right here. So they're bringing in the youngster here, second-year player, Nelson. Maybe he could get these guys going. So right here, in a good matchup on paper versus Washington, I'll have Pittman and Campbell as starts, and Alec Pierce as a borderline start. Pierce, he was getting it going with Matt Ryan over the last few weeks, but then put in a dud performance in last week's ball game as Pierce. So right now, it looks like Campbell's the second man over there going off the target rate. And Pierce is still a guy, the third option or deep threat here for this Indianapolis Colts team. But this week, he's tough to trust, in my opinion. So he's borderline at best. Now to Sunday Night Football, Green Bay Packers at the Buffalo Bills. So right here, Allen Lazard, he's been banged up. We don't know if he's going to play 100% in this game. But even if he does versus tough Bills secondary coming off a bye week and getting a little bit healthier here, at best he's a borderline option, is Allen Lazard. I know he's the number one wide receiver over there in Green Bay, but it's not saying much. We saw it in a great matchup versus Washington. No one really did anything in the passing game besides Aaron Jones in that one. Now to Romeo Doubs and Watkins. Romeo Doubs, the last couple weeks, the production's gone way down, and he's been serving as a number 1-2 wide receiver here in Green Bay. But now it's the big leagues here for Romeo Doubs, and these guys are paying attention to him on defense. After he had that breakout game in Week 3 versus Tampa Bay, each week the numbers have fallen off for Doubs, and it's not like he's not getting targets. It's not like he's not on the field over 70% of the time here is Doubs. He's just a guy that defenses are locking up, and he's got to make adjustments right now, and he hasn't. So he's a guy you can't trust after 2 horrible ball games, especially with a goose egg in Week 7. He's a sit, and Sammy Watkins, he's back in the lineup. But is he a guy you really could trust? Number 1, to be healthy, and number 2, to get enough targets and make enough plays here to have fantasy value. I know this is a ball game versus one of his former teams, but I can't trust Sammy Watkins this week. He's a sit. Now Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis, the last couple weeks, these guys are getting going, especially Gabe Davis. I think he was playing with that injured ankle, but he was out there for tons of plays. But the last couple weeks, 3 touchdowns in the last 2 games here for Davis. So their starts, and Isaiah McKenzie, he got benched a little bit in their last ball game versus the Kansas City Chiefs, where Shakur came in. So right now McKenzie, he's losing his role maybe a little bit as that slot guy, and he's a sit this week. And out to the final ball game, Monday Night Football, Cincinnati Bengals at the Cleveland Browns. So Chase, Higgins, and Boyd all starts for me. Chase, he was slumping for a little bit there, but the last 2 weeks here, he's put up top numbers at wide receivers, Chase, and he's back in action. And Joe Burrow and him are in mid-season form now. And T. Higgins, I know the last couple weeks have been down weeks here for him, but he's a guy in a good matchup versus the Browns here. I think he could exploit this secondary. This Brown team, coming into the year, a lot of people thought this defense will be a top-tier D with Clowney and Myles Garrett, obviously, but they're getting hurt in the secondary. Wide receivers are making plays, and Higgins I have as a start this week, and Tyler Boyd, I'm going to have him as a start as well, coming off a huge fantasy game with 30 fantasy points plus is Tyler Boyd. And the week before finding the end zone, he's a guy right now where they're just spreading him out right now over there in Cincinnati. 3 receiver sets, and they're all making plays. So all 3 of these guys are starts for me. Now to the Brown side of things, Amari Cooper, it's been a good season for him here in Cleveland. So I don't know what happened in Dallas. Maybe he was injured. Maybe him and Dak didn't have a good rapport. But whatever it was, he came to Cleveland now, and he looks like an elite wide receiver, low-end 1-2 guy for fantasy football. So you start him each and every week, especially with David Njoku out now for multiple weeks. I think we're going to see more targets here for Amari Cooper. And now Donovan People-Jones, he's becoming quickly a guy that you should at least own in fantasy leagues here. He's getting the deep balls, he's playing tons of snaps, and he's making the most of it here. It's Donovan People-Jones with 9 or more fantasy points in 3 ball games or more. So right here, he's a guy I have as a borderline. If he could do it one more time here for Cincinnati, then you're pretty much going to start him each and every week for the most part, is Donovan People-Jones. So that's the Week 8 wide receivers. Every matchup starts as hits of the fantasy football season.